Hello everyone, welcome to the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we bring the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down from the examination point of view. With this, let's take up the articles for today. The articles that we have for today are on the screen, and let's take up the first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper talks about the understanding the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Now, this organization has been featuring quite in the news because recently we all know the fiasco that happened wherein the national spokesperson of the ruling party, that is BJP, made some comments, and based on that comments, this organization registered its dissent, and that is why it has come into the limelight. This is not the first time wherein India has clashed with this organization. So in this respect, from the examination point of view, we'll try to look at what this organization is and some important points about this organization known as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So what is this organization? So first of all, it is the second largest intergovernmental organization after the UN, with a membership of 57 states. So with respect to the number of states as their members, it is the second largest intergovernmental organization, and as the name suggests, it tries to be, or it claims to be, the collective voice of the Muslim world, where all the countries which are part of this organization have majority of population as the Muslim population, and therefore it endeavors to safeguard and protect the interests of the Muslim world in the spirit of promoting international peace and harmony among various people of the world. So that is the motive of this organization, and it was established by the first Islamic Summit Conference held in Morocco in September 1969 to marshal the Islamic world after an act of arson at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This mosque is in Jerusalem, which also comes in the news a lot, by a 20-year-old Australian then in 1969. So due to this attack, the organization was first formed, and the headquarters are in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. So this is about the organization, which has a membership of 57 states, and it claims to be the collective voice of the Islamic world and the Muslim interests. You can see that most of the countries are a part of Upper Africa and West Asia, with some countries being in the Southeast Asian countries as well. So the first charter was adopted in 1972, and talking about the key bodies of the Organization of Islamic Committees, so the bodies of the heads of the state is known as the Islamic Summit, and the chief decision making body is known as the Council of Foreign Ministers, which takes decisions and implements those decisions. Right? Now, what is the status of India's relationship with OIC as an organization? So, as I've said before, the relationship of India with this organization has not been an easy one, and has not been on good grounds. On a lot of issues, even before this issue, India has been at loggerheads with this issue, with this organization, such as the Jammu and Kashmir issue and other issues as well. So first, when as a country with the world's second largest Muslim community, India had been invited to the founding conference at Rabat in 1969, but was humiliatingly ejected at Pakistan's behest. So due to Pakistan, India was not allowed to participate in the meeting of the OIC. So, and India stayed away because of a multiplicity of reasons. So why India is not very keen on joining this organization? Because it's an organization founded on religion. That is why India wants to stay away from it. And also that there was the risk that improving bilateral relationships with individual member states would come under pressure in a grouping, especially on issues such as Kashmir. So due to this issue also, India abstained from joining such an organization. And at the 45th session of the Foreign Ministers Summit in 2018, Bangladesh, the host, suggested that India, where more than 10% of the world's Muslim live, should be given an observer status, but Pakistan opposed to this proposal as well. That is why Pakistan has been quite the player in this organization to oppose any move which is favorable to India, because it thinks that if India joins such an organization, it might engage with the other players and hence decrease the say of Pakistan in this organization. That is why every move which is favorable to India in this particular organization by other states as well, Pakistan is the first one to oppose it. And that is why what India does is that India tries to build bilateral favorable relations with the countries, and it has been successful in doing so with these nations such as UAE and Saudi Arabia. And through these bilateral relationships, India has generally tried to have a sway with these countries, as well as avoid whatever decisions or whatever proclamations OIC makes. Since it has good relations with the major players, it has been able to avoid any backlash coming from this organization. And therefore, India, like I said, with respect to the issue of J&K as well, India has consistently underlined that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India and is a matter of strictly internal to India, and it has continuously defended the issue of Jammu and Kashmir in front of this organization, and that it has proclaimed that OIC has no locus standi on the issue. In 2019, India made its maiden appearance at the OIC Foreign Ministers meeting, which we saw was the implementing body of the Organization of Islamic Countries, and it was a guest of honor in that particular meeting. The then External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj participated in this meeting. So this was the vital information regarding the Organization of Islamist Countries and the important information around it. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper talks about the environmental index, wherein India has been ranked last. So there are a lot of indexes on environment. This particular index has come into focus because it has ranked India as the last country on its index. So this becomes important from the point of view of GS3, in which we study environment with respect to prelims. So let's understand a few things about this index. First of all, which organization brings out this index known as the Environment Performance Index, or EPI. This index is brought out by the Yale and Columbia universities. Right? So it is brought out by these two universities, and it tries to score all the nations on their performances to mitigate the adverse impacts of environment and to conserve the environments on basically three fronts. One is their work done on climate change, one is their work done on maintaining ecosystem vitality, and the other done on environmental health. So these are three chief parameters, and then they are divided into further sub-parameters. So what are these three? First is the work done on climate change, which has been assigned 38% weightage, then environmental health, which has been assigned 20% weightage, and other is the ecosystem vitality, which has been attached 42% weightage. And then these parameters are further divided into the work done, such as, let's talk about climate change. So the climate change parameters is further divided into the climate change mitigation strategies, which are wherein what kind of work is done to lessen the greenhouse gas emissions for the black carbon, for the methane, carbon dioxide, and ocean plastics. So all of these sub-parameters are the parameters to judge what kind of strategies are being done to lessen the impacts of climate change. The second parameter, which is that of environmental health, which means that what work is done to maintain the environmental health. So the sub-parameters in this are what is the performance on waste management, on dealing with heavy metals, on maintaining sanitation and healthy drinking water facilities, and air quality. So the sub-parameter of air quality is where the index has scored India, scored very lowerly for India for air quality, right? And then the last parameter, that is of ecosystem vitality, is further divided into the efforts done on maintaining the biodiversity and conserving the ecosystems for it. So that is why biodiversity and habitat, ecosystem services, fisheries, what is the work done for sustainable agriculture, maintaining water resources and lessening acid rain. So these are the sub-parameters which are taken into consideration with respect to the these three parameters to mitigate the impacts of environment degradation, and that is the parameters of environment performance index. So this is what is important for us to understand, that what are the major parameters and which are the organizations which are bringing out this index, right? With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper is about the FATF, or the Financial Action Task Force, and the Pakistan's position on its grey list. Now, this issue has been in news for quite some time, and it becomes important for us to study from the GS2 point of view with respect to the international relations, right? So we'll study about what is this FATF, what work does it do, and what is the Pakistan's position on its grey list. What is the concept of this grey list? So what is the FATF first? FATF is the Global Financial Crime Watchdog, which means that it is the international institution which checks in financial crimes such as money laundering and terror financing. So it wants to check these crimes which are happening on a global scale, which also affect the global trade and economy. So it was established in July 1989 by a group of 7, or the G7 summit in Paris, initially to examine and develop measures to combat money laundering. So the organization was first started to combat money laundering, and then it was extended to also deal with terror financing, to combat terror financing, and then in April 2012 it added efforts to counter the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Those weapons which can be used for mass destruction and affecting lives of many people, the combat of that also was added to the mandate of the Financial Action Task Force, and its secretariat is located in Paris. So this is the mandate or the work that is to be done by the FATF. Now, who are the members? The FATF has 39 members, including 2 regional organizations, that is the EU or the European Commission and the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC. And India is a member of the FATF consultations and its Asia Pacific group, which is the regional arm of the FATF. First, India became an observer in 2006, and then India continuously negotiated to become a member, and it further in 2010 became a member as the 34th country which became the member of the FATF. Now, what are the functions that this FATF does? So FATF as a body to act as a watchdog on financial crime does all the work such as setting the standards which are required for combating of such crimes, and then also recommending the actions for the countries which they must do to get rid of these activities, and also after setting recommendations to monitor these actions as well, whether these countries are performing such actions to the standards as well, is the fulcrum of the task that the FATF does. So that is why it brings national legislative and regulatory reforms by setting the standards, and it reviews money laundering and terrorist financing techniques. So it also monitors and continuously strengthens its standards to address new risks, now such as the regulation of virtual assets which have spread as cryptocurrencies gained popularity. So increasingly the organization is bringing that into its purview as well, because as much as the good users of these currencies are there, it can also be used in terror financing and money laundering. So and then it also monitors countries to ensure they implement the FATF standards fully and effectively and hold countries to account that do not comply with the standards. Here is where the position of Pakistan comes into picture and the concept of the two lists. What are these lists? The two lists which the FATF brings out is the black list and the grey list. These lists essentially are those lists wherein the organization finds out that some countries are not pertaining to the standards set by the organization with respect to checking money laundering and terror financing. After reviewing the performance of these countries, they are categorized into two types of list, either blacklist or grey list. So what is the blacklist? Blacklist is those lists where the countries known as non-cooperative countries or territories such as or NCCTs are put on the blacklist, which means that these countries have identified to be non-compliant with the standards set by the FATF, and they are said to be supporting terror funding and money laundering activities. So, and the FATF revises this blacklist regularly, adding or deleting entries. So currently, are there any countries on this blacklist? Two countries, North Korea and Iran, are currently on the blacklist of the FATF organization. And then what about the grey list? Grey list is the list of those countries who are suspected to be carrying on with such activities, and the FATF has given them certain directions or plans to be followed to check these activities of money laundering and terror financing. So they are considered a safe haven for supporting terror funding and money laundering and are put into the grey list, wherein they have to perform certain functions to assure the FATF that they have taken the needed actions to check these activities, and therefore it serves as a warning that it may enter the blacklist. So Pakistan is currently in the grey list along with 21 other nations. So 22 nations currently are in grey list. Right? So why is Pakistan on the list now, which the article talks about? Pakistan has been on the grey list of the FATF since June 2018. It has been in and out of the list since 2008. First, it was put in such a list in 2008, and then it was removed from the list between 2012 and 2015, and now currently it has been in the grey list since 2018. So it has a history of being in the grey list of FATF since 2008 because it has failed to check money laundering and leading to terror financing, and was given a plan of action to be completed by October 29, on which it was held that it was not taking favorable actions on these plans. So Pakistan inclusion in the grey list can be attributed to the fact that the country's anti-terror laws are still not in line with FATF standards, and also with the latest UN resolution 2462 that pitches for criminalizing terror financing. So a lot of activities are suspected to be going on in Pakistan which do not check these activities and are carried on with counter terror financing as well as money laundering activities, and therefore continuously FATF has been putting Pakistan in the grey list. Now what is the impact of putting any country on the grey list? So whenever a country is put into the grey list of FATF, it acts as a deterrent for a lot of other economic aids that the country can get, such as Pakistan currently wants to avail a bailout package from the International Monetary Fund, which it is not able to successfully negotiate on the account of being in the FATF grey list. So such kind of deterrents happen, and getting economic aid and support of other countries becomes very difficult if a country is in the grey list. So grey listing has adversely impacted its imports, exports, remittances and limited access to international lending. Recently, the IMF asked Pakistan to complete the last remaining item in the 2018 AML CFT action, or which is also anti-money laundering and counter finance terrorism, terror financing action plan on the effectiveness of terror financing investigations and prosecutions of senior leaders of UN designated terrorist groups, and promptly address the deficiencies identified in the APG's mutual evaluation report under the 2021 action plan. So consequent to this, Pakistan did arrest two of the important designated terrorists such as Hafiz Saeed and others, and 300 other associates, but still some other actions are yet to be done. So this was the background with respect to FATF and Pakistan's position in the grey list. With this, let's move on to the next article. The next article which appears in the newspaper talks about the new advisory on type 1 diabetes. Now we know that the diseases are frequently asked in the examination and they form a part of general science for a part of prelims, which questions on which regularly feature in the newspaper. So now, what is the new advisory on type 1 diabetes? So we'll look at that, and what is diabetes and the various types of diabetes for the purpose of examination. We'll take a look at that. So what is diabetes? When we talk about diabetes, basically, diabetes is a non-communicable disease, which means that it cannot be transferred to someone else with reason of contact or any other medium, but it is a disease which is non-communicable, that occurs either when the pancreas do not produce enough insulin, which is a hormone that regulates blood sugar or glucose, or when the body cannot effectively use the insulin it produces. So the diabetes is a condition where the vital hormone, that is insulin, which is responsible for regulating sugar in the body, is either not getting produced, or if it is getting produced, it is not effectively being used. So this condition creates diabetes, and there are two types of diabetes. The first type is the type 1 diabetes, which is the content of the today's article, which is also known as juvenile diabetes, as it mostly affects children of age 14 to 16 years of age. This type occurs when the body fails to produce sufficient insulin. So this is the first type where the insulin is not able to be produced well. And people with type 1 diabetes are insulin dependent, which means that time and again they have to take insulin shots, which means they must take artificial insulin daily to stay alive. And what is type 2 diabetes? Type 2 diabetes affects the way body uses insulin. So in this case, insulin is produced but is not able to be effectively used. While the body still makes insulin, unlike in type 1, the cells in the body do not respond to it as effectively as they once did. So that is the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes occurs mostly to population with 45 and above age group is the most affected with it. And it's the most common type of diabetes and has strong links with obesity. So type 2 diabetes is the most common diabetes in India. Now, are there any steps that India has taken? Apart from that, we'll also study a third type of diabetes known as gestational diabetes. This is a type of diabetes occurring in women during pregnancy, when the body sometimes becomes less sensitive to insulin. Gestational diabetes does not occur in all women and usually resolves after giving birth. So this is a situational diabetes occurring only in pregnant women. And diabetes majorly affects 5 major organs, named as kidney, heart, blood vessels, nervous system and eyes. These are the organs which majorly get affected due to diabetes, and the factors that are responsible for the increase in diabetes are an unhealthy diet, lack of physical activity, harmful use of alcohol, overweight or obesity, or tobacco use, etc. These becomes the factor which can cause the onset of diabetes in individuals. Now, what are the India's efforts taken by the government in this respect? So India's national non-communicable disease target is to prevent the rise in obesity and diabetes prevalence. So India, when in its strategy to reduce non-communicable diseases, diabetes forms a big part of the strategy. And India's national program for prevention and control of cancers, diabetes and cardiovascular diseases and stroke in 2010, this was the program instituted in 2010, to provide support for diagnosis and cost-effective treatment at various levels of healthcare. So these are the efforts, and the new advisory which has come up talks about type 1 diabetes, which means that, like we saw, type 1 diabetes is for mostly adolescent children. So the advisories tries to put out regulations as to how wherever the kids are going, they should be carrying enough medication, and all the facilities with respect to dealing with diabetes for them should be taken care of, is what the advisory is talking about. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper talks about abnormal dinosaur egg found in India. Now, in a very interesting finding that has happened is which has happened is that in the Bagh region of MP, a fossilized egg of dinosaur has been found, but one of the eggs is rare in a manner that one egg is inside another egg. So this is a egg in egg situation, and this is the first time that such a phenomenon has found in a dinosaur species, which was a reptile species. This phenomenon was earlier only to be found in the birds, but this has been found for the first time in a reptile species, which is the dinosaur species, that one egg has been found inside another egg. So this is the discovery, but for us the important point which becomes is the location of this discovery, which is the Bagh city of Madhya Pradesh, which also has the Bagh caves, which are the historic caves. So let's look at the Bagh caves located on the bank of the Bagh river in Madhya Pradesh. Bagh caves is a group of 9 Buddhist caves. We know that the questions get asked a lot on the caves and historical monuments of the ancient period, and these caves were developed around the 6th century AD. So which means that these are Gupta period caves. Its architecture is very similar to the Ajanta caves in terms of the design, execution and decoration, and these are remarkable and interesting rock cut shrines and monasteries. So there are a set of 9 caves which are the Bagh caves. So these become an important point for us to study in allied with this news article which has appeared. With this, we come to end of today's session. We'll meet tomorrow with the important articles in the newspaper and its discussion. Thank you.